Hi, I'm Mark. This is Mark's Tech Box on YouTube, and today I'm going to bring you guys a full review of the Habi smart home heating system, including their smart thermostat and their smart radiator valves. Now, as I said before on this channel, Tado made the change at the start of October that for new customers wanting their TRVs to control their Tado smart heating, they would have to subscribe to Tado's service. They also backported this for anyone starting a new home in the Tado app, even if you purchased a Tado X product previous to October. Now, I don't like it when companies make something that was previously free something for subscribers only, and so I went in search of an alternative and I came across Habi. Now, Habi is a product from a company called Salus Controls. Now, Companies House says they were first registered in the UK in 2004, and so they have been around a long time, and they largely manufacture heating related products. That's things like thermostats and heating controls. In June, they launched a new product under the brand name Habi exclusively into Screwfix. Now, the products you're going to see in this video I picked up myself, and I've been using them for about a month now. The other thing I want to say at the start of this video is that in the process of making a purchase decision, I sent quite a few emails back and forth to Habi to try and decide if it actually catered for my needs. And the key thing is that the TRVs can trigger the heating controller without any kind of subscription. During the email process, I found that Habi typically responded on the same working day if I emailed them on a Monday to Friday. When it comes to price, it's also a really affordable system, and the radiator valves will set you back £40. The wireless thermostat and boiler control will set you back £80, although it's currently on sale for Black Friday at £70. Before I get any further into the review, however, I want to do the worst possible thing anyone on YouTube can do for engagement and share you my verdict, because if you probably guessed from the video title, I just can't recommend this product. And in all honesty, it started off strong, and then over the last few weeks it's got progressively worse. My main and pretty significant issue are that the devices simply keep going offline. Now, the main boiler control, which kind of acts as a thread border router and the main receiver, has been connected to my home Wi-Fi with no issues. It's on my 2.4 GHz network, and I've assigned it a static IP just to try and work out what was going wrong. This has been stable with a good connection to my home Wi-Fi, and this part hasn't gone offline at all. The problem is everything else does at random intervals. Now, the thermostat and the radiator valves don't connect via Wi-Fi, they use the thread border network set up by that receiver. Now, the initial one that went offline a lot was my bedroom radiator, and I did email Habi about that. They basically said it was due to signal strength. Now, this would be fine, except it's only about 20 foot from the actual receiver. There's no thick walls in between, and in fact, as you can see, there's literally a staircase and then the receiver's on top of a kitchen cupboard. The bedroom door doesn't even get shut, so there's not really any doors in the way. And then we can add into the mix the wireless thermostat, which is on the same floor as the receiver and about 10 foot away, with literally no walls or doors in between it. To me, this suggests there is some significant issue with the strength of the thread border router coming from that receiver. And for that reason, I really cannot recommend these products, because you need your heating system to be reliable. And looking at other reviews, I'm not the only one who's had this issue. So that's the kind of headline and why I wouldn't recommend it. However, you might still be looking at it, so I'm going to treat this as a normal review and go into all the things I normally talk about when it comes to tech reviews, so you can see all of the spec and my experience of using it and setting it up. So let's get into that. And I want to kick off with Spec, because I think for a lot of people that is going to be make or break. So firstly, their radiator valves and their smart thermostat are Matter over Thread compatible. That means they're going to work with Apple Home, SmartThings, Amazon Alexa and Google Home. One thing to note is that you will need to do the initial setup and configuration in the Habi app. This is especially true if you want those radiator valves to control the boiler. From that point on, you can then also add them into your Matter compatible app of choice. So for me, that's been Apple Home. All of their products come with a 5-year warranty as well, which is fantastic. Let's briefly move specifically onto the boiler control and wireless thermostat. So the wireless thermostat is powered by 2 AA batteries, and Habi make no comment on how long these will last for. This wireless thermostat has ITLC advanced load compensation built in. This means it can measure the difference between the internal temperature and set temperature of the thermostat, and it can adjust the boiler thermostat appropriately to avoid overheating. That wireless thermostat has dial controls and a button. Now, that boiler receiver that connects up to the wiring from your boiler acts as a thread border router. This is how the valves and the wireless thermostat connect to it. It can work for just heating controls like I've been testing out with my combi boiler, but it can also work for hot water as well, so if you've got a separate hot water tank. One of the things I really like about this wireless control is it has physical controls on the device. That means for your hot water and your heating, there's an on, off and auto switch. On means the heating or hot water is just on, auto means it's controlled by the schedules in the apps, and off means it's off. Moving on to the radiator valves, these are powered by 2 AA batteries as well. And Habi, again, don't say how long this will last for. These valves each come with a Danfoss RA adapter if you need it. These valves connect by a thread and have an ultra-quiet valve actuation. This means they're pretty quiet. On board is an LCD display, and then there's a twist area at the top and a button on the top for going through all sorts of different settings and controls. And the instructions that come with these basically show that you can change pretty much any setting that you can in the app using the controls on the valve itself. This is fantastic. And so via the app or via the valve, you can even do things like adjust temperature offset. And it supports temperature offsets of minus or plus 2.5 degrees Celsius in 0.5 degrees Celsius increments. So that's the spec, but what's missing from these? So the big thing missing is any kind of open therm compatibility, and I know this is going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people. Now my boiler doesn't have a wiring for that, so it doesn't bother me. What's really interesting though is that sellers do effectively sell the wireless control separately. That doesn't have the Habi brand on, but their own brand. And so it does make me wonder if they could potentially release one that is open therm compatible in the future, and you could just update the control. Now, I've no affiliation with Habi, I don't know if that's on their roadmap, but it is just worth mentioning. The second thing is that Habi App has no open window detection or native geofencing. The controls in the app are just simple on-offs and schedules. But that doesn't mean you can't achieve geofencing, and we'll get onto that. But first, let's talk about the design. So the boiler control is a simple white box, and it wouldn't look out of place on your wall, but mine is just tucked away in the cupboard next to my boiler. The front has those physical controls which are great for controlling your heating in the event that the wireless connectivity was to fail. You can still just turn on your heating. Moving on to the wireless thermostat, it has a nice rounded edged back piece which is square and a protruding round dial. There's a function button on the bottom right, and you can use the dial to adjust the temperature or whatever setting you're trying to adjust. The screen shows the information you need as you're trying to set it, so things like the current temperature or the target temperature. You can also see whether it's actually actively heating and also the connectivity status. This screen is only on when you activate it by pressing the button or using the dial. And then we have the radiator valves, which in all honesty look very similar to Tado's V3s. The LCD display is simple and it works well, and thanks to the included instructions, as I said, you can basically change any setting that you can in the app on the valve itself. This is through a variety of things like pressing the button and turning and adjusting all of those things. As an overall package, the design is simple and modern and I think looks pretty good. So let's get into installation. Now I did do a full setup video when I first got that, and I'll link that below if you want to see all of the ins and outs. So this is just going to be a kind of overview. So for me, as I was replacing my Tado wireless receiver, I actually installed this myself. However, if you don't know what you're doing with something like this and you're not comfortable working with wiring, make sure you get a professional to install it. This of course is another expense to keep in mind, but it's always worth making sure something is done properly. The wireless thermostat screws onto the wall, and so it's nice and easy. And then the radiator valves also just simply screw on, and so if you're switching out an existing radiator valve for one of these, it's super easy. One thing that I really like is that every single piece of the packaging, including the packaging that the batteries were in, is made of cardboard or paper. This makes it all super recyclable and not a bit of plastic in sight. When it comes to setting it up in the Habi app, you'll need to create an account first. You can do this with kind of email and password, but also using Google or Apple. It's worth noting if you're doing it via Google and Apple and you want the app to stay signed in, you will also need to tick the checkbox. This isn't necessarily obvious when you're signing up, so I did make sure I fed this back to Habi. When it comes to pairing, you'll simply scan the QR codes for the device in the app and add it all in. You'll set up your home for your boiler control, and then you'll set up rooms for your individual devices. And generally, I found that everything installed quickly with no issues, apart from one radiator valve that required a few resets and it kept just not adding. It failed at different points, and I actually think there was probably a server issue at the time. The final step, if you want to add them to third-party services, is to go into the individual devices and put them into matter pairing mode to add them to something like Apple Home. It's worth noting that you shouldn't use the QR codes that come with the device, you should use the ones that come from the app. Not quite sure why, but everything added into Apple Home nice and easily. From there you're done, and it's time to set up any schedules that you want to, and this is a good time to talk about the Habi app. So the Habi app, for the most part, is simple but functional. The home screen shows your devices and rooms, the temperature they're at, and the temperature they're set to. You can use the plus or minus keys to adjust the temperature for each room there. This gives you the controls you're going to want really quickly. Each device lets you click through for more options. Here you can also see the current and target temperatures and adjust those. You can turn the device on or off, or turn the schedule on or off, and we'll come back to schedule in a second. The three lines at the top right give you more options, including changing the name, room, going into the schedules, checking the battery and connectivity status, turning on child lock, and in installer settings you can carry out a temperature offset if you want to. This is particularly useful if you've got another thermometer in a room that say the radiator valve is and you want to make sure they match up. There's also an identify mode which makes the devices light up. This is really useful if perhaps you've moved house and took all of your radiator valves and you need to work out which is which. And this is a good time to talk about schedules. So you can set schedules for each individual device in the Habi app. And you can set schedules in three different ways. You can choose to set a schedule but it's the same for every single day of the week. You can set one that is different for weekdays or weekends, or you can choose to do every day individually. Whichever way you do it, you always add slots. Each slot has a start time and a desired temperature. And in all honesty, this interface is actually pretty well thought out. It's simple, but I like it. It works really well. There's no complicated dragging things around or clicking into things. You just add a slot and set a temperature, and then add the next one. The app also has a few other options around setting units, hour format, data collection options, and notification settings. It's also worth noting that all of Habi's devices have frost protection built in as well. And for the most part, the Habi app works really well, but it does kind of highlight a couple of missing features. So there's no open window detection and there's no automatic geofencing. So your schedules work whether you're at home or not. And personally, I'm not fussed about open window detection, but I am fussed about automatic geofencing because I don't want to heat a house that I'm not in. And of course, you could manually turn off all of your heating when you leave the house by going into your phone. But that's not very practical. I like to automate things. So let me tell you how I've done that. And if you've been subscribed to this channel, you'll know exactly how I did that. And I've done that by putting all of my schedules into Apple Home instead of Habi. And Habi's functionality makes this a really practical solution because their radiator valves can trigger your heating control. And that applies whether you've got your heating schedule set up in the Habi app or Apple Home or whatever. So I won't go into all of the details as to what I've set up and how I've done it because I have done a whole separate video on that. I'll link that below if you want to set up your heating schedule in Apple Home. But let me give you an overview of what I've got. So firstly, at various times throughout the day, an automation runs if someone is at home that sets the different devices around the house to different temperatures. For example, just before I start work in the morning, it sets my home office radiator. An hour or so before we're likely to go to bed, it sets the bedroom radiator. And throughout the day, all of these adjust depending on kind of our general routines. Secondly, I've got an automation that runs when the last person leaves home that switches everything off. It means if we go out for the day or if we go on holiday, the heating just gets switched off. And then finally, I have an Apple Home automation for when the first person arrives home. And the action for this is converted to quite a complicated Siri shortcut. This basically checks the time and adjusts various devices based on the time of the day. So if I get back at 9 at night, it might heat the bedroom up to a warmer temperature than it would if I got back at midday. Because these automations can work with any manufacturer, I've actually incorporated my Meros matter-compatible electric underfloor heating control into this as well for my bathroom. Now generally all of these automations have been working well when Habi devices have been connected. And actually this setup has only required a few tweaks to my home automations in Apple Home. And all of this leads on to say, well, what is this system like to use? And I mostly covered this at the start when I said why I wouldn't recommend this, but for the most part it's frustrating. And that's because when it's all online, it works really well. However, it seems to be really fickle. And because it's not reliable, it's something that's really difficult to keep in your house, especially in the winter because you don't want to wake up cold because something has failed and gone offline. Nor do you want to be spending money on heating that hasn't turned off when you've left because it's gone offline. And I've really wanted to resolve these issues and get it working. I've even tried removing that wireless receiver from the cupboard and putting it on top to see if that improves the signal. It doesn't. At one point I even picked up an extra radiator valve for my bedroom to see if it was the valve that was having issues, and I spent several hours with them next to each other, whereby one was connected and one wasn't. This seems to suggest that it's not just the signal, but it's something else with the valves, because it's not just the one that's gone offline, the others have done it as well. If we continue talking about the valves from a usability perspective, in terms of battery life, I'd expect to get about 6 to 9 months based on their usage so far. In terms of how loud they are when they operate, I'd say they're quiet, but they're not silent. They're basically somewhere between the Tado V3s and the Tado X. So they're a little bit louder than the X, but a lot quieter than the V3s. They're not going to wake you up. And I say that as someone whose head is pretty close to the radiator when I sleep. So all in all, and you know the answer to this, what's the verdict? And as I've said a couple of times throughout this video, I simply cannot recommend them. Despite the matter over thread compatibility, the affordable price, and the fact that the TRVs can trigger your boiler controls, they're just not reliable. I'd love to know below if you guys have tried any Salus or Habi products and what your experience has been. If you got any questions, stick them below and I'll try and answer them for you. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys again soon.